A very warm welcome to our channel, ICSE English exclusive for ICSE T25. Welcome to the first class of the channel, which will be a class on composition. But before we move into that, quickly like, subscribe and share. Now quickly moving on to this topic is composition, which comprises, and we have divided the class of composition into two parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 will be a general class on the entire question number 1 of your paper. Composition part 2, I'll go for topic wise. There are 5 kinds of composition. So part 2 will comprise of all the kinds of composition looked after, taken care of individually. Okay. Now the first thing that we need to understand is the composition carries 20 marks and it comprises of question number 1. Okay, that's the format of the question paper. Your question paper will start with question number 1 having questions of composition. Now, when you check question number 1 of any language CISCE published specimen paper, sample paper or a previous year's question paper, you will find question number 1 always having 2 instructions. I'll read the second instruction first. Write a composition 300 to 350 words on any one of the following. And we have the following kinds of compositions. We have descriptive, we have narrative, then we have argumentative, we have story writing, and we have the picture composition. But the first instruction that you see on the slide, do not spend more than 30 minutes on this question. You know, it's the most important instruction, but generally avoided or disregarded. However, an examiner tries, your language paper cannot be made less lengthier. When you are going for the language examination, always train your brains that you will have to answer a lengthy paper. We can't help that. Okay. And for that, what we need to understand is this 30 minutes timing. You cannot take more than 30 minutes on question number 1. So how do we do that? That's the first question. First thing is, the second instruction that is given, disregard the 350 words. Always remember, I have to write a composition on 300 words. Again, how do I do that? During the reading time, that's very important. During the reading time, which you have of 15 minutes, you have to spend the last 10 minutes of the 15 minutes reading time for composition. Believe me, if you spend the last 10 minutes of the 15 minutes reading time for composition, it will not be a waste of time and you can easily end up writing the composition in 30 minutes. And we have to remember, we are writing a 300 word composition. Okay. Descriptive, narrative are specifically for those who does not have a good flair of writing. Okay. Story writing is for those who have an excellent flair of writing. Argumentative composition are for those who know that I can think on the feet. Okay, I can think instantly. A topic is given to me, specifically who are very good debaters. Argumentative is for them. Picture composition, those who attempt descriptive or narrative, they can also attempt picture composition. Topic wise, what points you need to remember, I'll tell that in composition part 2 class. Okay, so first please remember this, do not spend more than 30 minutes on this question. Write a composition 300 words on any one of the following. If you spend more than 30 minutes and if you do not end up writing a 300 word composition, you will have a tough time in answering question numbers 2 to 5 in a paper. Okay. So these are the kinds of compositions we have. Okay. The compositions are descriptive, narrative, argumentative, story, and picture. Now, going on to the next one, the basic norms of writing a composition. Now, let me remind you, these basic norms are only for the ISCE, council examinations. It is not for any other board. Okay, it's not for a state board, it's not for a CBSE board. I will be talking about the basic norms of writing a composition only for ICSE. Okay, not for any other. Please take a note of it. Okay, I'll quickly open my pointer because I need to make you understand. Okay, now when we examiners get a composition, okay, when we examiners get a composition writing, an examiner always loves a composition which is not more than 2 pages. Please remember this. And this fact, not liking a composition of more than 2 pages, definitely acts as a catalyst of getting more marks. Okay. Now, how is a composition marked? There are 2 kinds of errors. One is a simple error and one is a gross error. Each of your simple errors are multiplied into 1. Each of your gross errors are multiplied into 2. Okay. And then we add the entire thing up and divided it by 2 and we get something called as error frequency. Okay. An examiner is given a chart like this where we have the error frequency and the how much marks we can allot. Suppose our student gets an error frequency of 3%. So what mark can be allotted to this? So from this, why is it important to understand how an examiner marks your composition? It is important to understand that means what? The council wants us to write errorless composition. They want us to write errorless sentences. So suppose in a 300 words, again, not a 350 word, but in a 300 word composition, suppose you end up writing 20 sentences or let's say 15 sentences. Sorry, the examiner is wanting you to write 15 sentences which do not have any error. And if you can manage to give such a composition where all the 15 sentences are not having any error, you can easily get at least a 17 out of 20. Let me say a 15 to 17 out of 20. Okay, you can either end up getting 15 or you can end up getting 16 or you can end up getting 17. And this, if added to the factor of being errorless, if you can also give me a quality composition, I as an examiner can even mark you an 18 or a 19 or a 20. But to be very honest, this is very rare. This is also very rare, but definitely I can give you an 18 out of 20. So before writing a composition, the one thing we need to remember, I am going to write sentences which are grammatically errorless. That's the only thing. Okay. Now, let me change the slide. I'll go to the next slide. What are simple errors? Now, definitely the question is coming to your mind. How do I know which is my simple error and which is my gross error? That I have categorized in the next slide. Now, the rules for simple errors. Number 1 is spelling. We have to be very, very careful about spellings. Suppose we don't know the spelling of a definite word, we will try to use synonymous words. Punctuation, very, very important. It's not only at the end of a sentence we put a question mark, we put a full stop, we put an exclamation mark. Every punctuation, okay, in terms of starting a sentence with a present participle, we put a comma in between. the single quote or the double quotes, every punctuation error is being marked. Next is repetition of the same word. Okay. Suppose sometimes we write again and again. That's a simple error. It's not allowed. Okay. The next one is use of vernacular language. Now, whichever state you belong to, Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, whatever state you belong to, we cannot use a vernacular language. Suppose you write a sentence, on a rainy day, my mother cooked khichdi. The khichdi will be marked as a simple error. Use of contractions, for example, didn't, can't, don't. All these are contractions. You cannot use them. Use of abbreviations. Generally, we cannot write MA. We have to write a Master in Arts. MLA, we cannot write. Minister of the Legislative Assembly. Yes, we have to elaborate it. Sometimes we tend to forget that this is an abbreviation, like TV. It's something very commonly that we speak of. But let me tell you, even TV will be considered as an abbreviation and you cannot use it. You have to write television. App. I downloaded an app. So that app is an abbreviation. It has to be application. Okay. So these are something that we commonly make a mistake of. Just for your convenience, I'll again go through a run through and we'll write some examples. Spellings, I think you have understood. Punctuation, even the commas, even the semicolons, the inverted commas, all are taken into account. Okay. Repetition of the same word, that's not allowed, like again and again. Okay. That's a common mistake sometimes people make. Use of vernacular language. Not only use of vernacular language, I want to add here use of local addressals. Okay. For example, mummy, papa, these are not allowed. Grandma, grandpa is also not allowed because grandma and grandpa are local addressals by the British people. You have to write grandmother, you have to write grandfather. Okay, all these are simple errors. Use of contractions, don't, that is not allowed. Can't, you can't write can't, you have to write cannot. Okay. Use of abbreviations like for example app, TV, all these are not allowed. Okay. All these are simple errors. Remember, every simple error is multiplied by 1. Okay. So please be careful. Seems to be like only 1, but definitely it will cost you a lot of marks. The next one we have the gross errors. Okay. Beginning sentences with and, but, so, because, since. Sentence structure. Any kind of mistake of sentence structure, that's not allowed. Okay. Now use of very common mistakes that I find. Okay, let me first go to the first point. Beginning sentences with and, but, so, because, since. We cannot begin a sentence with and. We cannot begin a sentence with but. We cannot begin a sentence with so, because, or since. Okay, that's strictly not allowed. Please remember these words. Otherwise, you will be marked at the sentences will be marked as a gross error. Any kind of sentence structure problem that includes voice, that includes tense, that includes speech. Okay, that includes complex sentence structure or compound sentence structure. Any kind of sentence structure mistake is my gross error. Now, very common mistake, okay, in terms of sentence structure, which I generally find is using multiple conjunctions in a sentence. Multiple conjunctions. I have found, answer scripts where one sentence has, 10, 11 lines and there is a full stop at the end. Okay. I went to my mother's house and I had my breakfast there, but my mother was not there. So she left the food served on the table covered with a lid, and then I found a note beside it, and then I read it, and I understood. My mother had to rush to the medicine shop, but she will be home soon. we cannot write such a sentence. And that's a very, very, very common mistake I find in papers. Okay. If you go back to your school sheet exams, I think you will find the same mistake done by you. So please be careful when we are writing a paragraph. We are not using multiple conjunctions in a sentence. The first conjunction will be taken into account. All the, after the first conjunction, all the second ones will be taken as errors. Okay. So please be very, very careful about it. Now, the next point which I had to discuss is, the next point which I had to discuss is that we have to be very careful about these errors, and the next class will comprise of your composition part 2, where I'll be taking into consideration all the 5 topics individually. Okay. In the meantime, suddenly I remembered that we also need to take care of just 2 things more. One is, it is compulsory to make paragraphs. Now, quite obviously, we are not writing paragraphs, we are writing compositions. So there has to be paragraphs. If there is no paragraph, okay, suppose there is no paragraph, it leads to -1. Okay. Second one is, we have to keep our compositions to the content. Okay. Supposedly we find that it's very irrelevant, then it leads to around -2. And if it's minor irrelevancy, it leads to -1. Okay. So, at the end of the day, we must realize in a language paper, any kind of error we do, it leads to penalization. Okay. Now, to the content, how do we decide -2 and -1? That I'll discuss in the next class. That is my composition part 2 class. As of now, we are wrapping up. When you play the video, put pause, take notes, put the video on pause, take notes, have a clear understanding of what I wanted to convey. Any doubts, please write your doubts in the comment box. I'll try to clarify them in the next class. The next class, very confidently, it's coming up tomorrow again. Okay, we are going to have now back-to-back classes. The gap that happened, very unavoidable circumstances, as they say. We were affected less or more by the adenovirus. So just a disclaimer, especially board aspirants, please be careful. The new virus, the adenovirus, it's harming children. Yes, children less than 5 years, like my daughter, are very prone to it. But even my class 9-11 students are getting affected. Okay. Sorry. And you can understand I was also a little bit affected of the cough and cold. So thank you everyone for attending the class. Any doubts, please make sure you put in the comment box. In the meantime, please do like, share and subscribe. Okay. Thank you. Bye bye. All the best.